Hello, my name's Philippa Waller.
My name is Penelope Waller, and we are two of the directors at 4D Human Being.
And welcome to the 4D Human Being podcast. What's it all about, Pen?
It's all about your personal and professional relationships. It's about your communication skills, how you lead, how you work and build teams, how you are looking after yourself and your well-being, and how you are much more at choice. What do we mean by that?
Well, sometimes we can get a little caught in patterns in life and we can all be a little bit on our automatic pilot. So 4D Human Being is all about helping us get back to choice and being a four-dimensional human being. And your fourth dimension, of course,
is intention. So whether it's about your impact, your leadership style, your team dynamics, whether it's about your well-being, whether it's about your communication or your presentation skills, anything that involves human beings interacting with other human beings, 4D Human Being are here to help.
we're going to take a deep dive and look at some tools, insights, theories that are going to help you go from a 3D human doing to a 4D human being so that you can happen to the world rather than the world simply happening to you. Welcome to the 4D Human Being podcast. This is more on emotion because, quite frankly, as a human being,
there's never enough time.
It's the endless vortex, isn't it? Feelings and emotions. You know, once you scratch that itch, a dear friend of mine, we've been through so much together, my friend Candida, who I was at RADA with, Gently Bentley is one of her lovely phrases that I still think about in tough times. And it's so interesting now, we're both we were both actors together and now we're both psychotherapists. And she said to me years ago, sometimes don't stir the silt too much. No, and there is, at the bottom of the river. And it definitely is about balance. Anyway, how are you today? Because you do. I think a good dig is definitely have a look and read the cues and get the message. But the archaeological dig sometimes, particularly with trauma, isn't always your best bet.
Well, I tend to agree.
You want to look and understand.
Yes, exactly. And I think
you don't want to keep going over and over and over and over and over.
No, absolutely. I'm sure we'll talk about, your emotions kind of being dictated to you, or you generating them. And I wonder if we're always as brilliant as we could be at recognising the external offers that are quite positive, actually, because we're so sort of lost in our own head. So I had a really nice thing today. I do look quite good. I've done my hair with my big blow dry tool, so I do look quite good.
Andy, make Penelope the promo face of the podcast today.
I've got my sort of an old sports sweater on because I've been down the gym. But as I was walking to the gym earlier today, it's quite late now, isn't it, Phil? It's quite late in the evening. We're doing an evening podcast. As I was walking to the gym, there was a group of gentlemen across the road at number 1 on my street. They were clearing out a garden, and he just looked at me, and I was bouncing off the gym, and he just looked at me and said, "That is the nicest smile I've seen all day." And I had a jaunty spring in my step, Phil, after that. And also, he was clearing a garden, and I said, I could do with someone clearing my garden. And I thought, not only from a feeling good perspective, but from a business perspective, job well done on his behalf, I think. I was very happy.
Yeah. Well, that is the power of the jaunty emotion and the smile.
And the jaunty gardener. I was very happy.
Yeah, but look at that in terms of positive engagement.
I know. So I'm just saying, the offers are out there sometimes, not always, but the offers are out there. You got to grab them while you can, Phil.
You've got to grab them. There's a big thing on that, which I've definitely talked about in a different podcast. I've certainly talked about it on the Wellbeing 4D OnDemand series. Available. Do get in touch. Is the danger and safety cues is that many of us, and certainly good old natural selection and evolution, we are primed to look for the danger, the danger cues and what's going wrong. So we start filtering out the good stuff. We start filtering out the birds are singing, the sky is blue, I've just had a yummy breakfast, my car's working, somebody greeted me as I walked into the office.
Yeah.
or we just filter that stuff out, and we start looking for the negative. So we have to be very conscious of that. I want to make a link though, because I went to the gym today as well, and I'm also in a hoodie. It's like the gym day. Between emotional energy and exercise, because like you, I have been listening to ultra processed people, and I mean, one is always hearing different things.
Chris Van Tulken.
Yeah, and his twin, which is also a very interesting thing. Yeah. Anyway, so what was really interesting, I was on my way to the gym when I heard this, and I only go to the gym really to do sort of muscle toning. I don't particularly go to do cardio, although I was boxing today, which is definitely cardio and emotional, I would say.
Emotional management.
Emotional release. But he was saying in his book that, because it's all about ultra processed food, and that there's been
such a good book,
and there's been so much emphasis on it's not the food that's not the problem, and I'm not going to name any company names in this, but it's not the food is the problem. You can eat whatever you want. I mean, let's stop there. But it's not the problem as long as you exercise. And he said, the thing is, actually research is telling us the body's really good at compensating for what you're putting in it. I mean, obviously within reason. Like if you just sit and eat donuts 24/7, you are going to put on weight. But it's quite good around that middle ground, as it were, at compensating for what you're eating.
Yes. It's amazing.
And he was saying whether you're an Olympic athlete or don't do much exercise, like the body will kind of calculate what it needs to use up. So I was thinking about that, and I thought, and I was watching people in the gym going, what were you all doing it? But actually I thought, I'm going to totally reframe going to the gym and exercise as emotional exercise, not physical. I mean, it is physical, and of course we're building muscle and all of those things. But I thought, actually, I'm going to
endorphin release.
Endorphin release, that when I'm driving my very short drive to the gym, which is very motivating, let's be clear, that actually in that drive I'm going to be thinking, I'm going to do an emotional workout now. I'm going because I'm going to feel better.
Good reframe, Phil.
Good reframe. So
I was going to say, just because I can't get out of my head now, because you've mentioned donuts, the new adverts with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. It's like, I'm watching it and thinking, is this really happening in front of my eyes? It's so brilliant and bonkers.
I know,
and
I loved it.
I have no words. If you haven't seen any of the ads in the Dunkin' Donuts campaign with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, hats off to them for like stepping out of the norm in terms of big celebrities doing adverts. It's totally bonkers, and I love it. I love it.
And also two things for me. One is that they did it and that they allowed it to be a little bit more kind of personal and real.
They put those clothes on for a start.
Yeah, they put those clothes on. But between him and J-Lo, they make, when he goes into the recording studio, they made it real.
She barely speaks. Her jaw is just on the floor. It's so brilliant. So brilliant.
But that's what I like. That's what I liked about it. Actually, it was really good writing.
It was brilliant.
I was actually thinking that as I was watching it, I was thinking these writers really understood what they were doing and what those beats were going to do. That less is more, and it's a visual medium. And we only need a few lines to absolutely, make it sparkle. It was really, really well written.
And I'm not saying go out and eat massive boxes of Dunkin' Donuts. Although everything in moderation, a treat is a treat.
Everything in moderation. Listen, let's be human here.
But Dunkin' Donuts, hats off to you for that creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Hats off to that.
Anyway, we digress. But it is quite rare that you see an advert come up on Instagram or wherever it was I saw it, and you literally, you can't take your eyes off it, and it just makes you smile like that. So, linking back to the emotion, that is a rare feeling. So, thanks, Duncan.
Yeah. There's a little preview for the next podcast. You started that anecdote with the words, I can't get it out of my head. and there's a little promo here for the next podcast, which is all about mental or intellectual energy. And I love that phrase, I can't get it out of my head, because what that phrase innately suggests is I'm not in control. I cannot get it out of my head. And I love that phrase. So I'm like, we're definitely coming back to that. Okay, so today, because we talked in the last podcast about some ways of really thinking about your emotional energy and some tips and tools to really manage your emotional energy throughout the day. And today we want to get really practical, really apply it. I want to talk about leadership and teams and being at work or in groups, communities, families. Firstly, contagion. Secondly, conservation. Thirdly, communication. I mean, I love an alliteration. I want to do a PhD in alliteration. Contagion, conservation, and communication. So, contagion, all about how emotions are spread, how people feel, what it's like to work for you. Why should you even bother with emotional intelligence? I mean, so many people talk about, don't want any emotion in the room, which is the craziest phrase. And I have it we'll come to it, but it comes up in the therapy room as well.
Well, also what I often say after helping people with some really nice tools around the emotional energy that they're bringing to a space, I do say use it for good, not evil.
Yeah.
Because it is so powerful.
Yeah, it is very powerful. So exactly. So contagion, use it for good, not evil, absolutely. And emotions will be there anyway, so you might as well contage the goodies.
Well, you might as well choose them. Yep.
Might as well choose them. And there's a really, really, really good reasons too. Like the research is there, so we'll get to that. Conservation, I'm just going to touch on this because it's more probably nearer what we talked about last time about taking care of your energy. But just to think about energy in a slightly different way. And then communication, which is all about application, which, Pen, you're going to hold that bit a lot, although I'm sure I'll be diving in. Well, let's do a little intro. We're going to do contagion, conservation and communication. I'm going to give you a few quick stats for those who need that nice old left brain anchor. 90% of the most successful people have a high EQ. I can think of a few who don't, but 90% apparently. I cannot verify these stats. I've pulled them from an article, but I like them. I'm trusting enough. Apparently your EQ is responsible for 58% of your success. I will buy that. Both in private.
Big.
Yeah, both in private and professional life. And people with a high IQ earn approximately €26,000. So this study's definitely from Europe. 26,000 euros more per year than somebody with a low EQ.
IQ or EQ? EQ.
EQ. This is EQ. Yep, no, IQ.
I do believe that. I mean, when you think about leadership and you think about EQ, I mean, people do use that terminology to me, and when they're talking about their bosses sometimes. I mean, in terms of your experience of the workplace, huge.
Oh,
huge.
Huge. So we're going to get to that. I want to say this one other piece, which is just for any naysayers out there who are still wearing a bowler hat, carrying an umbrella to work and saying we don't want any of those emotions at work. That emotion and reason have classically been seen as opposing forces.
Ooh.
And the insight that changing your thoughts can change your feelings forms the basis of a popular form of psychotherapy. Now, interestingly, I have not infrequently had people in therapy and definitely in coaching who definitely come with that order of events. It's my thoughts. No, it's my thoughts that are the thing.
Yes.
So the insight that changing your thoughts can change your feelings forms the basis of a popular form of psychotherapy. But the true relationship between thoughts and feelings is far more complex. Not only can thoughts lead to feelings, good or bad,
sure,
but feelings also lead to thoughts and actions, which can feed off each other, according to Professor Barsade. Emotions and reason are completely intertwined.
There's two things I want to say about that. One is, to live in the era of bowler hats and umbrellas hanging over the arm.
Simpler in a way, Pen, but I'm not sure we'd have fared
we wouldn't have fared very well.
Just gender-wise.
The idea of going up to London on a train and seeing people trotting over the bridge in bowler hats, which of course women would pop on a bowler hat these days.
Well, but you wouldn't have done. You'd have been at home without a fridge.
Okay, so the modern version without a fridge or a dishwasher. But the second thing I was going to say, yes, I was listening to John Gray on Sam Harris's podcast, and I think I sent a little quote to you where he said, I'm totally paraphrasing here, but the idea that we can change people's ideas, opinions, beliefs, etc. with sort of rational facts is pretty deluded, because it's much more that you're going to change people's emotional state and how they feel about things emotionally, and then they will data gather to support their new beliefs and assumptions. Whereas we think, if I just keep saying it, that'll be fine.
Well, and ever increasingly so, I think, in our current climate. Okay.
Yeah, so emotions could not be more important.
Could not be more important. Well, Pen, I mean, Dunkin' Donuts, need we say more? I mean, it's such an influencer. Well, it's why we fall in love and have relationships. I mean, it's just, it's everything, isn't it? Anyway, I want to say this because I think this is brilliant, and I don't think people have even thought about this. So, as a leader, a team, a business, always talking about performance, right?
Yes.
And I was reading this and I thought it was brilliant. And I was like, most people don't unpack words like that. Like, what do we think performance is? And when you really unpack it, so I'm going to read this. There is significant research showing how emotions influence memory, perception, and cognition. These factors influence every aspect of an employee's performance. In fact, what is performance other than the combination of thought, feeling, and actions? And I was like, yes, like, you cannot distill, it's the sum of its parts. You cannot distill out results or performance and take emotion out of that. Like, it's this cake it's this combination of thinking, feeling, and acting that is our life force. It's our engagement. It's our performance. It's what drives results. So we ignore emotional contagion and emotional kind of culture at our
100%.
peril. I will step off my soapbox. She is
waving the flag for emotions.
It's so true, though, isn't it?
It's so true. And that's not only in terms of task delivery, but when we think about what really is going to drive business in the future, certainly in terms of human beings, it is going to be innovation, creativity, thinking outside the box, new ideas, collaboration, communication, all of these things, which I'm sorry to say this, if anybody out there was unaware, you cannot remove emotion from those equations. It's totally...
exactly.
If you think about how you operate in a team at work and think about how you feel about the various people and therefore how you interact, collaborate, perform, influence, offer things up, help them, blah, blah. There's no way around it. There's no way around it.
Well, this is the other thing, and this has happened recently with a client. It's reminded me how often I hear this. Actually, I'm going to reverse it just to prove the point. How often do you hear a client saying, I just love my work colleagues. I love my boss. The culture is just, I go in, I just feel so good. I love who I am in that environment. I love what I do. I love everything about it. But, some of the rationale in some of the meetings is so unclear or difficult that I think I'm going to find a new job. Versus, I've got a good salary, I admire the product and the business, but my boss is a tyrant, my team members are a nightmare, the culture is vile.
But I'll stay.
Yeah, but I'll stay. I mean, we just never hear that.
I know.
Just never hear that. What we hear is, I really like what the company's trying to do, but I cannot stand the emotional culture. Yeah. That's what we hear.
Totally. If we're thinking about retention and attrition, I've been party to some exit interview stats data recently, and it's pure emotion. It's pure emotion. It's how people feel about other people and how they've been treated, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So we rest our case. A quick word from us at 4D Human Being. If you're enjoying the show, please do click follow so that you can have the 4D Human Being podcast instantly in your feed. And we'd love it if you liked and reviewed us. Let us know what you think.
Please do think of one or two people that you could share the 4D Human Being podcast with. Somebody who would really benefit from the content you're listening to right now.
Back to the show. So, in general, says Cal State researcher Saavedra, in general, the key is awareness, which is great.
You just said that so you could roll your R's, didn't you?
I know, it's my new trick with my Italian. In general, the key is awareness, which is great news for us at 4D Human Being, bearing in mind the centre of our 4 D model is intention, becoming aware and intentional. So becoming aware is the key, really. Once you've done that, you've done a lot of the work.
Yes.
Because the tools from there are pretty, we can give you those.
Yeah.
So also, Heart Math Institute found that emotions such as fear and anger had lower frequencies, while emotions like love and joy are found to have higher frequencies. And they also found, the Heart Math Institute, that feelings of love and compassion can create a synchronized harmony between our heart and brain frequencies, positively influencing those around us. And this also reminded me of the whole thing about contagion. It's quite a sticky way to remember it, is entrainment. If you put a bunch of clocks, not digital, but pendulum clocks in a room of all different shapes and sizes, they will
eventually,
entrainment will happen, and they will all be led by probably the largest clock,
and they'll all synchronize eventually,
and that is how we operate in groups and teams. So it's also, by the way, emotional energy has also been found by a professor at Stanford, Tiller, to aid the healing process. I mean,
so you've put your hand up.
Put my hand. I know. I don't know how to stop that.
I will say on I think the clock pendulum, like we're thinking sort of grandfather clock, is a really good analogy, and it might also be useful to think about that in terms of how we are emotionally contaging our friends, colleagues, etc. Because if you're not intentional about your emotions that you're taking into a space, if you're not awake to it and don't recognise the importance of what you bring into a space and how you contage others, you are likely to be contaged by either the most dominant person in the space and or the sort of lowest common denominator of emotion. And this is, this is very often perhaps why, if we're on our 5th, 6th, 7th virtual meeting of the day, in terms of what's being brought into the space, probably unintentionally, we'll all end up synchronising with each other, but it might not be at the place we'd like to be perfectly honest.
Absolutely. Which actually slightly preempts the conservation, which is about, don't manage your time, manage your energy. That exactly that, at the end of the day, that's when somebody in that group would serve them by having saved some energy earlier in the day so they can inject some later in the day. Exactly. When people are infected by the moods of others, especially their leaders, it impacts everything from their beliefs to the decisions that they make. And we can all think of ourselves as we go to work as walking mood inductors. We are waiting to receive the mood. Exactly. So I just think that's so interesting. It's not just an add-on, this, the idea of emotional energy in a space. It's going to influence people's thinking, beliefs and decision making.
Yes.
So it's such a direct correlation. You want people motivated and believing that they can hit your business targets, for example.
Yeah.
Then they need to be feeling good to do that.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And yet we'll be thinking, if I just tell them again,
Yeah. Rational.
That'll do it. And that is not how human beings work. We are emotional animals at the end of the day. So if you can fire up those emotions, really sort of penetrate the limbic system,
exactly,
that is going to be much.
Exactly.
It's not the only thing you have to do as a leader. Obviously, there have to be other things in place for your teams. Motivation, structures, processes, all of those things. And if you think about how your team is feeling and you don't think it's correlated to performance, well, think again.
Yeah, and in fact, the research also shows, this is my last bit on emotional contagion research, that I thought was really interesting, because those positive feelings of love and compassion not only synchronise in terms of, the contagion that you spread, they synchronise you they literally synchronise the harmony between your heart and brain. So you are harmonised, which I don't think we necessarily think about that. You are internally harmonized because you're probably in your ventral vagal, so you're not in your fight or flight or in your disconnect shut off. You're in your lovely social engagement part of the nervous system. So everything's our system likes, like, oh, this feels good, I can think clearly, I feel good, ooh, let's create stuff. Now we've got energy to create. I've got
1970s music going on in the background.
Everything's like wah wah wah, it's all a bit psychedelic. And when we've got emotions like anger and frustration, which makes sense again, we will be kicked into our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight or freeze. And that will cause an erratic and unsynchronized heart and brain frequency pattern, which will negatively impact our environment. So if we're not in a, we've got our own internal team that we're contaging, and if they're out of sync with each other, well, then there's no way that we're going to harmonise our team.
No, absolutely. And I would link that to, and you and I have this conversation sometimes, you know, when you have to do a task. So let's say, for example, in our world as training providers, I have to write a proposal for a client. Now, I've written hundreds, thousands of proposals over the last decade or so. But some days it's like wading through mud, and I can't quite find the thing or the flow or the words or really what the thing is that I think the client might need. And then other times I can knock one out in 5 minutes. Yeah. And it's totally related to my emotional state, because nothing else has changed. It's not like I've suddenly lost the ability to
lost
write.
The information or the ability to exactly. And that's where we started.
It feels like everything's in sync. It's like, oh, this is so easy. I'm feeling good.
I'm in flow. Exactly. And it's that and it's that complex intertwining of thinking, feeling and acting that is, we know when it's in flow, or when we've been caught in a vortex in the river.
And whilst I'm a bit cautious about using the word productivity, although it is a word that we use in business and industry, and it's important. The productivity, I can literally, it's like firing out bullets when I'm in that flow. I can just bang, 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 get things done. And then when I'm not like that, it's so much harder. And again, thinking about that in terms of your team, of course you want them in that flow state. The productivity goes up, they feel good, they're collaborating better. It's like win, 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 win.
Yeah, I like to think of the creative output rather than productivity. But it's absolutely dependent. It's like, I've shouted at that team member 5 times. Why aren't they firing out brilliant ideas? Well, guess what? They're in erratic and unsynchronized heart and brain frequency right now. Okay, right. We could talk about this forever. So, okay, we get it on the contagion. We're going to give some tools to apply in our communication
I will just
section.
say on the contagion before we go on to the communication. We have said this before. Obviously, just think about the contagion. It's a two-way street. So just be aware of that. And sometimes,
oh gosh, don't get me started on that.
I know.
So the absorbing, I think that's a whole other podcast, because I've thought about this a lot. Exactly that. Okay, let's say 2 things briefly on this.
The absorbing and the transmitting.
Yeah, the absorbing and transmitting. So one is to be aware of how absorbent you are, and I am the Pampers.
You are.
I'm the Pampers of emotional energy. To be aware of how absorbent you are, and that's in a few ways. In terms of, look, like you said at the beginning, Pam, look for the good stuff. Like, really become aware and get conscious about what your radar is looking for. If you're hypervigilant for the danger signs and the negativity, and you're a high absorber, that is going to be, that's tough. That's what we deal with trauma. It's tough. So know how absorbent you are, and look for the positive, because that's going to be easy. Pen, you can watch a Dunkin' Donuts advert and feel good. Like, if you're a high absorber, it's not going to take much to feel good.
It's true.
A quick episode on Netflix of a comedy.
Well, The Gardener at number 1, quite honestly.
The Gardener at number 1, exactly. It's really, exactly. So exactly. So when you flick it onto the positive, brilliant. You get an easy win as a high absorber. The other side of it, though, is you cannot always change the fact that there are negative transmitters. So we have to get good at our invisible cloak or our shield or whatever, metaphor we want to use. So that's a whole other piece.
And or transmitting ourselves as well. So pushing emotional energy out into the space to try and change the emotional field of other people as well.
Yes, to use your own energy field as a shield, like a superhero. Exactly. Well, it's the old adage, isn't it? Kill by kindness.
Yeah.
But they could be shouting and shouting. Charlotte, our sister, was telling me a story about coming out of a supermarket, and she'd done that thing where she'd popped in. She thought, I'll give me 5 minutes. I'm going to risk it for a biscuit. And she came out, and the parking, this is years ago, and the parking, she had her young kids at the time, and the parking attendant was there and really told her off, like really went like the extreme parking attendant. This woman went, you shouldn't. And our sister Charlotte, who's totally delightful, just said, it's okay, just give me the ticket. Like, I'll pay it. It's fine. Don't worry. the woman sort of went for a second go. She went, you shouldn't, blah, blah, blah. And Charlotte went, honestly, she said, I totally hear you. Honestly, you're doing your job. I took the risk. It's absolutely fine. Just give me the ticket. It's fine. And the woman eventually, not only did she sort of completely change her mood, but she didn't give her the ticket. Yeah. She said, oh, well, maybe next time, you might want to. She said, absolutely. And that is the power of positive contagion.
Wow. Our sister Charlotte is pretty exceptional at being a radar for the positive signs out there. And it pays huge dividends to her in terms of her experience of life.
Yeah, it's the positive superhero shield. Anyway, Charlotte listens to this podcast, so Charlotte, hello. Okay. So,
I don't know
your biggest fan.
You'd think you should have enough of us day to day.
She thinks she'd have enough. She's like, I haven't spoken to you for a while, but I've heard you. So, enlightened leaders will increasingly harness the knowledge of emerging brain science. I love the way that they are linking emotion and brain here. Enlightened leaders will harness the knowledge of emerging brain science to understand the whole brain perspective of human dynamics. And as they do it, it will transform the world of work as we know it. So it's down to the leaders.
Yeah.
So we'll give some tools and tips. If you find yourself saying there's no place for emotions in the workplace, or you know somebody who says that, pop them this podcast.
Yes,
and
100%.
They can have a little listen to this. So,
well, some tips and tools. I mean, we could talk about a vast range of our portfolio of tools here. So I'm gonna cherry pick a few sort of thoughts and ideas. So the very first thing I would say, which goes back to what you said earlier, Phil, about awareness, and we've said this before, recognise the emotional state you're in. So we often ask clients, particularly coaching clients, right at the beginning to start getting really good at parallel tracking. So doing the thing, having the conversation, having the meeting, whatever it might be, but parallel tracking, sort of observing self and other, what's going on here, like what's happening in the space, physically, emotionally, intellectually, etc. So really noticing what's happening. That's the very first thing I would offer. Start noticing. We're not always brilliant. Some of us are, but we're not always brilliant even recognising the undercurrent emotionally what's happening. That's the very first thing I would say. The second thing I would say on this is be aware of the emotions that are arising. And again, I know I've said this before, but they do not have to be in the driving seat of your day, of your life, of your team, of your leadership. They might be useful, particularly if you've had that lovely positive contagion coming in, but they might not be useful. So you might want to think, this is the emotion that's arising, that's coming up. I'm just going to pop that into the passenger seat, and I'm going to go in with a different attitude or intention. And when we do that, the tool that we give to people, which I think is so powerful, is literally put a word in your head. Put a word in your head and let that be the new intention that you go in with. So, for example, it might be care or support or motivation or directness or whatever, however you want to create that field in your meeting, in your team, and let that drive how you then try to influence how you feel and how other people feel. Now, it takes a bit of practice. Some of us are good at it, but lots of us haven't necessarily practiced it. We just go in with whatever emotion is driving the bus in that particular moment. Just notice what happens. It's incredibly powerful. And again, we often say that if the team is not feeling, performing, behaving as you want, the very first thing to do is to turn the mirror back on yourself and think about what am I taking into this space. And even if you think it's not you, it's not your responsibility, it's not your fault, they should, try doing it.
Well, should is a really,
it's a red flag.
Yeah, should is your red flag. They should. And if any part of you feels like it wants to stamp its foot and say it's not fair, then that's also giving you a good indicator that the emotions are driving the old autobus.
Yes. And the third thing I would say is use your emotions as messages. So as a leader, something's happening, you're feeling frustrated, or one of your team members is feeling frustrated, we can then get caught in the game of, we're all feeling frustrated, we'll go in for the argument. Recognise the emotion, and if you can, I know it's not always easy, if you can take a moment to think, okay, that's happening. I'm feeling like this. I wonder what that's trying to tell me. Because very often we don't take that further step. We just get caught in the emotion driving the bus, and then we have a conversation from there. Whereas really what your emotions are doing is they're trying to give you some information. They're trying to give you some useful information, but they can sometimes take a little bit of decoding and unpacking.
Absolutely.
So those are the three things I would do. The kind of parallel observing what's going on, getting, really heightening that EQ. Second thing is put a word in your head, an emotional word in your head, ideally positive or might be neutral, that you want to take into the space. And then the last thing is to try and understand what the message is behind the emotion that's arriving in the space. There's loads and loads of other tools and tips we can give you around the emotion, but I think we're going to park it there for now.
The message might be, I need, or I want to, or, something that needs to happen. The message isn't, they're an idiot, annihilate them. The message is something around, something needs to happen. I need to say no to something. I need to set a boundary, or there's a want here that hasn't been met. So what needs to happen? And if it's a problem with another person, ask yourself the questions. You're a strategist, you're a leader. What is the problem here? Do they need skills? Do they need support? Do they need more information? What do they need? Like, there's something or confidence. There's something missing. Always something missing. And they're a human with their own experience. So I want to add a couple of things here. One is name it, which is if there's a strong emotion whizzing around, and maybe from you, or maybe not, take a breath, get yourself regulated, and you can name it. So being emotionally open, or whether it was a challenging time like a change, or having a culture transformation or a difficult conversation, being emotionally honest doesn't mean just sort of ranting. You can still name the emotion. I'm really noticing that there's some very hot feelings here, or there's some anger here, or whatever it is. That's fine. And then I would add to that the both and technique, which is that you can feel something, exactly what you say. It's a way of thinking about who's driving the bus. I feel very upset about something that you said, and I'm really committed to us getting back to a really good working relationship. So the both and is going, look, that's both true. The emotion's true, but and the intention's true,
and that's okay.
They're both true. So it's not avoiding, because if we try to avoid emotions, oh boy, will they leak out, and then we get the passive aggression.
If we can separate out that emotional and intentional dimension, be aware of them both, recognise them both, we are in a whole other ball game of communication and leadership.
Yeah. Exactly. So there's lots more on avoidance. We see a lot of people who are trying to avoid feeling. And this tips a bit into the intellectual or mental energy. What can happen when we're avoiding feeling is a lot of ruminating or anxiety, that we'll try and think. We'll strategize our way out of it. But actually, we are sort of caught in a trap, because that loop keeps happening where the same thing annoys us, and we keep strategizing or overthinking the next way to solve that slightly different but similar problem, rather than going underneath and going, what keeps happening here? Why do I keep feeling this? So we'll save ourselves a lot of time.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges sometimes with that, which is why we can sometimes either retreat or feel that we shouldn't feel our feelings, try and suppress them, is because we're either not very skilled in reading them and or kind of dealing with them in terms of how we communicate, or we get caught in a communication that isn't necessarily appropriate or relevant to the emotion that we've been experiencing. So it's take a pause, take a breath. You can feel your feelings. Just think about the context and the space in which you want to feel them, and sort of process and understand them. Yeah. Because sometimes we release them to the wrong person at the wrong time.
Exactly. Take a moment. Exactly. Yeah. And disconnection and avoidance, just as a footnote, do not create a calm, peaceful, loving human being or leader. So moving away from it all the time and avoiding it, and choosing to not talk about things, it's not a smart strategy for a peaceful, calm, harmonious way of being. It's another version of a difficult emotion. So, open door, I'm here, come and talk. Now, I know that's not always easy, but it's not about problem solving and fixing. Don't fix it. Just see it. Hear it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
We want to talk very quickly here, Pen, about written communication and presentations. So there's another thing on emotional contagion and emotions is you don't have to say everything all the time. And you don't have to name, the harder parts of processes or change or, a product. So if a change, for example, is tough, difficult, complex, uphill struggle, challenging, you don't have to open your presentation with that. So, I know this is really tough for you all.
Yeah.
I know everyone's feeling really down. Just be really careful about telling people what they're feeling when it's negative.
Totally. Well, which go back to the beginning in terms of this podcast, in terms of, use this for good, not evil. It's very, very powerful. Why not say to people, I know this is going to be really exciting for you, or I know you're going to be really pleased that you're going to...
I know we're all looking towards...
In this together.
In this together, looking towards what is possible here. Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
it's not about manipulation. Although, at the end of a presentation, if you want people to feel excited about your product or whatever you've just presented, why not say... We're super excited to give this to you, and I know you'll want to talk to us about it. Rather than, I hope that's been useful. If you've got any questions,
yeah. Well, and the other thing, please, can we just have a call out for not turning to a slide and saying, "I know this is very complicated and complex." And I know it's quite a difficult slide to read.
And I'm just like, you can't read.
Don't say it. Don't say it. And if you have a slide that you feel is going to be emotionally or mentally difficult, complex, or illogical for your audience, bin it. Please bin it. Bin it.
Or at the very least, reframe the narrative.
Yeah, reframe the narrative and say this is a really rich, interesting, detailed, exciting plan.
And I know you're going to want to catch up with me on all sorts of items.
Because we want to dive deeper into this. There's so much here, right?
I'm going to pick one that I'm really excited about.
Exactly. At least reframe it, at the very least. Right, so that is one of our bugbears. So, yeah, please, never, ever turn to your slide and tell your audience they're not going to understand it. Like, it's just no. Just no. We're done. Okay. So. Okay.
Well, they're not going to like it.
Yeah, you're not going to like this. Okay. So we've slightly skipped onto the communication application. We hope you find those really useful. I just want to do a very quick thing on conservation because I just love this. It's a little bit of a I'm sort of shooing it in a bit, but it's a wonderful way to think about your energy. Is that you're harvesting it. And I loved it was in the Chris Van Tulleken book as well, that every organism on the planet is kind of in a fierce competition for energy, right?
That's true, yeah.
Through the thousands and millions of years, we have done incredibly well, and we're incredibly lucky for all of our ancestors and all of our, every organism that led to that they fought so hard for energy to survive.
Yeah.
And so here we are, having basically reaped the benefits of millions and billions of years of investment in a sort of energy bank account that, millions and millions and millions of people and organisms have worked really hard to put into our bank account. So here we are at the sort of the pinnacle, at the leading edge of this fight for energy, and we got some. And then we squander it by getting into a row on social media about the quality of a dog food. I was like, don't waste your emotional energy. It's so precious. And
it's
so
true.
I think it's a really good way to think about it. Like, of course we all get, caught and, in moods and, we're human. It's wonderful. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And we fight for this energy. I mean, at the very least, you have to get to the supermarket, which, quite frankly, it's quite a fight on the best of days, isn't it? That you work hard for your energy. You're literally at work, working hard, so that you can provide for your family, provide energy so you can eat and be warm and have, buy energy. Get energy, buy the food. Somebody made me laugh about going to a supermarket and the pain of handing over the money. And I think it might have even been in this book, but the money You've got the trolley full of food is the energy, you know.
Yeah, that's right. The money's just a bit of paper.
The money's a bit of paper. The food is your energy. So we fight hard for it. You've got it. So
use it well.
Use it well. Yeah. Channel it creatively. You know, positive emotions will give you so much more channeling of positive creative energy. So I just want to say that about conservation of energy. We fought hard for it. The human being basically really historically has two modes, which is procreation and harvesting energy for procreation. So those are the two sort of energy. But of course, we've sublimated that with all this creativity. We know we've done incredible things with the use of energy. So think about where you channel it. It's basically your creativity, and it's basically your life experience. It really is, isn't it?
Yeah.
In relationship and creativity.
And I think particularly when we think about emotional energy, like if you think about the experience that you have day to day, if you think about the most memorable things or your best achievements, etc., emotional energy plays a massive part in how you feel, what you remember, what you manage to achieve.
Exactly.
So be mindful of where you are wasting your emotional energy.
Exactly. And if we link that back to creating a culture that has a really good emotional energy around it, that promotes so much more creativity, that allows people to channel all of their energy into much more productive things. And if you're getting caught in disputes or arguments, get them resolved.
Yeah.
You know, just make it a priority. You know, give yourself a timeline. Say, right, you know, we're going to, by Friday, 5 o'clock, we are going to have resolved this. We're going to have found what we can agree on. And there's a lovely thing on for that on emotional energy, that to resolve disagreement, you have to start by agreeing on something. Just something. And that might be, let's agree that we're going to get this closed, we're going to get this sorted by 5 o'clock on Friday, so that we can all... And it might be that we've got 1% crossover in our Venn diagrams, but we can at least agree that that is where we are. And let's agree to sort it out so we can move on.
Yes, and if I can say on that, there's two parties often involved in this in terms of the waste of emotional energy. So the first person, the courage to step in and say, okay, can we have this conversation, or can we, you know, just get this resolved so we can move on to more creative and interesting conversations and things. The other side of it, which in some ways can sometimes be even harder, is the acceptance of release of that situation. So if somebody steps in and says, look, I know I didn't show up at my best, or I know we don't agree on this, can you find it in yourself to accept and move forward? Because you may feel like you want to enter into that argument because of how you feel.
I think that's
but you are also victim to wasting your time and precious energy in the game.
Absolutely. Oh, let me say one more thing on that. But this is a whole lot that we're actually collating a lot at the moment on difficult conversations, and feedback as a separate thing. Not the feedback has to be a difficult conversation, but we will be doing lots on that, and we're going to have series on those on the 4D OnDemand platform, because it's such a big, important topic. There's two things that come up for me on that. One is that you need to move, that if you think about the ground between you as a distance, that you need to both cover some ground to meet. Exactly. So it's a really nice way to think about it.
And for your benefit.
And for your benefit, to go and live your life. And the second thing that comes up for me on that is, be really honest with yourself, because I know I definitely have, and I'm sure we all have. If you've stopped for a moment, you might realise how very attached you are to staying in that position and feeling those feelings and feeling justified in them, and being really attached to a narrative that is taking up a lot of emotional energy. It's so weird how we do that. We get really attached to these stories.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want to let them go.
No, exactly. Yeah. We have much more power. So go back to those 3 kind of tips and tools that we gave you, and whether you're on the giving end of unhelpful emotional energy or the receiving end of unhelpful emotional energy, you have choice. You have choice. You have choice.
Go spread the love.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the 4D Human Being podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Do take on board some of the insights, tools and tips, because every time that you try something new to get back to choice, you are making a vote for the you that you want to become. And I love that phrase, Pen.
I do too. And please do share this episode with somebody that you know would really benefit from the lessons and learnings we've been chatting about today.
And of course, if you're interested in more from 4D Human Being, do get in touch. We run workshops, trainings, online, in person, conference events and keynotes. We've got the 4D OnDemand platform for your whole organisation. And we do have a free Essentials membership where anybody can sign up for absolutely free to access some of our insights, tools and tips. So do get in touch with us if you'd like to hear more. We cannot wait to hear from you and to carry on the conversation.